In this tutorial, we're going to go over the step-by-step for drawing the template for the eyes. You're going to be using relative scale sighting, and remember you want to draw lightly. So we're going to follow these steps in order to try and get a good template as our starting point before we go in to add value. The first thing we're going to do is sketch an eye line. So I just want to put in an eye line. The next thing I'm going to do is draw 5 eyes across, and I'm going to make them roughly the size of quarters. I always like to start with the one in the middle and then add one on each side. And I'm trying to make them close in size. It's not going to be perfect, but I want to get close. And notice I want them to touch at the edges, okay? So it's important that this eye line is in the middle. I have 5 eyes, and that my eyes are all roughly the same size and touching on the sides. Then I'm going to measure my person that I am drawing and going from temple to temple for edge of the face to edge of the face, and then mark that on my drawing. So I'm going to be drawing about, let's see, my measurements, about 4.5 eyes. So I'm going to keep one eye, which I'm not going to draw in an eyeball, and then this is going to be my first eye and my second eye. So that means this is towards the edge of my faces. So if I were to dissect this in half, on each side it's only 4 eyes. So I'm going to come to about a quarter, and I'm going to say this is roughly the edge of my person's face. The next step is to measure and draw the iris. Remember that the iris is the colored part of the eye. It's about half the size of the eyeball, maybe a little smaller, but it is not something that is super small. And again, if my person is looking straight forward, it will be in the middle, okay? Then the next step is to measure and mark where the tear duct is at. So I'm going to look at my person, and generally the tear duct is about 1/3 up from the bottom of the eyeball. If I were to divide this into 3 equal parts, it would roughly be about here. So my tear duct is outside of the eyeball and roughly here, but I'm going to check it on my person, and mine comes in roughly lined up with this bottom of the iris. And then I need to check the other side, and that is about the same. So just outside of the eyeball, I'm just giving myself a little mark. The next thing I want to do is measure the angles from the top and bottom of the tear duct. So it's just that little, almost Pac-Man-like space right there. So I'm going to measure the first one, and I'm bringing that measurement to my paper. And then I'm going to measure the bottom, and it's roughly this way. And then measure the other eye. And then measure the bottom. Bring that down to my paper. And then my next step is to draw the upper eyelid. Now this is going to be done with 3 different measurements and marks. My first one is going to come this way, and remember, I'm looking to see, does it overlap my iris? Is it above my iris? Can I see white above the iris? So in my case, I'm looking at my person, and I can already tell that the top of my iris is going to be cut off. So I'm going to measure first the angle going up, and then I'm looking for where does that turn, and even though it's more of a curve, I'm looking for straight angles. So I'm going to have an angle up, an angle over, an angle down and away. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to measure my person, and my angle is roughly this, and it stops and turns right when it starts to touch that iris. And so then I'm going to measure my next measurement, and it's like this, kind of up a little bit. Sometimes it's flat, depends on the person. And that measurement went to almost just past the edge of my iris. My next measurement is coming in at this angle. So this is the angle. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So I'm going to measure, and I have my angle coming up like this to almost the start of that iris. My next measurement, a little bit out past, and it's almost flat. And my last measurement comes out past my eyeball. And so now I've gotten the top of both of my upper eyelid. Now I need to measure and mark the lower eyelid. This is going to be done with 2 marks. Generally, there's a mark that's going to come over about 2/3 of the way and then go up. This could be flat, it could be angled up, it could be angled down. So I always need to measure my person. So I'm going to measure that angle, and on my person, that measurement comes right at the bottom of the iris to about the edge of the iris. And then my next measurement goes up, and it should line up to where I marked my edge before. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and my measurement comes just below on this side. So I have my tear duct, and it comes just below and about to the edge of my iris. And my last measurement should be at this angle, and it is, so I can mark this in. And so now I've mapped out my eyelids. And remember, you want to keep these light. I have them a little darker for purposes of recording, but you want to keep these light so that when you go to put value, you don't have to do a lot of erasing. So the next step I'm going to do is to measure and draw the pupil. Now, because my person is looking at me, I know that right away my pupil is going to be in the middle. So I'm going to look at my person, and because the top part is cut off, I'm looking from here to here. Where is that pupil? So I can only see the eyelid and the bottom of the iris. So now I have to gauge, it's probably a little bit higher than the very, very middle halfway. So I'm going to look at my person, and remember, the pupil can dilate. The less light there is, the bigger the pupil. So in this case, it's roughly half the size of the iris, and it's about the middle of my iris, which is slightly higher than halfway of my eyes. The next thing in step 9 also says to add my highlight. And for my person, that highlight is right on this edge, top right, and it's a little bit smaller than the pupil. So that's going to be the highlight. Sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 little highlights, and they might be near the pupil or in the iris. You want to make sure any highlights that you see, you are adding. The next step is to measure the angles and draw the crease above the eyelid. So there's generally, depending on the person, a crease that comes in around here, and so you want to check that on your person. Sometimes they're quite distinctive, sometimes they're covered by eyebrows, sometimes the crease is at the eyelid. So in this case, my person has a crease up here, and it goes out this way and down, and the same thing on this side as it comes up and over, but there's only one on this side. So as I measure that, it's not going to be exact to my eyelid. So I'm going to measure it. I'm going to bring that down. And then same way I did the eyelid, measure that crease. So in this case, there's my second mark. And then this one on this eye splits off here and here. So I have a crease here and here. And then I'm going to check my other eye. So I'm going to measure, and I see that my crease isn't that far away. Comes down, and then my crease comes over, and then my crease comes down this way. So there's my creases for the upper eyelid. The next step I'm going to do is to measure and mark the inside edges of the eyebrows. So generally, the eyebrows are going to line up somewhere close to the tear duct or the inside of the eye here. And then on the outside, I'm going to end up measuring an angle that might be out from the corner of my eye to where the eyelid is. Now you have to remember that your eyebrows are going to typically touch or overlap where the top of this eyeball is, because remember, our spheres are sitting in the cranium, which is our skull, and that eyebrow is on that brow bone up here. So it typically is here. Now some people definitely have eyebrows higher, but you're going to have to measure that and put those measurements into your own drawing for your person. So I'm going to look and see, and my first eyebrow lines up pretty close to the edge of this eye, and then the outside I'm going to measure that angle, and I can see that that angle comes down and it's going to end somewhere right about there. I'm going to do the same thing for the other eye, and so this one, when I measure, is slightly in just a little bit from the edge of the tear duct, and I'm going to measure that angle there. And the angle is like this, so I'm going to put the outside edge there. So I went ahead and did inside edge and outside edge for my eyebrows. My next step is to roughly sketch the shape of the eyebrows. So I'm going to measure those shapes and see what are the angles that those eyebrows take. So the first measurement, the eyebrow comes down a little bit, and then it comes over, and then it comes up. So it's over and up a little bit, and then it's up, and it comes to roughly halfway here on the eye, and then the next angle comes down like this, and now I have to measure for the top. So I'm looking at it, and I can see already this is not straight. It's slightly tilted like this. And then the next part of the eye I'm measuring is coming over, and then it has a slight angle up, and then it angles down. So right about here, it angles and meets back with the bottom part of the eyebrow. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and immediately I can see this comes in a little. Now it comes up, so it has a little bit of an arch coming up, angled, and it's coming to about the halfway on the eye, and then it starts to go down at this angle, and then I'm going to measure the top. So on this side, this eyebrow angles out, so I'm going to angle that out just a little bit, and then I'm going to get my measurement to come back here. I've got this flat along here, and then it starts to curve up, and then my last angle is curving like this and meeting here. So I have my eyebrow. So I've roughly sketched the shape of the eyebrow. Now I need to measure and draw the bridge of the nose. So the bridge of the nose is that part of the nose that comes between the eyes at the eye line there. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a little lower. What I'm looking for is how wide is it, and roughly how far from the edges of my eyes is it. So when I measure my person, it's roughly the size of the iris in this distance. It's a little maybe more. So I'm going to put a mark here and a mark here for the bridge of my nose. And I'm looking to see that this distance is accurate. So I just want to see that that's close. It doesn't have to be 100%. Now I'm looking for what is the shape coming from the brow bone along the edge of the nose on both sides. So as I look at my person and I see this line comes in and starts to come down and then away. And then I see on this side, it comes in and then down, and it starts to come out a little. So some people, this will start to flare out. Some people, it will stay narrow. On this particular person, it's coming a little bit down and away. So I have now my template. At this point, these lines may or may not stay, but I will begin to add value. So when you get to this point, you're ready for the value in your drawing. You may notice at this point, I don't have actual hair in my eyebrows. I don't have eyelashes. All of those things will come when I begin my values.